Welcome back. This video is about 10 very valuable rare error coins of Queen Elizabeth II, and these are worth a fortune. Well, Elizabeth II, or Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, was the Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms from 6th February 1952 until her death in 2022. She was the Queen Regent of 32 sovereign states over the course of her lifetime and remained the monarch of 50 realms by the time of her death. Her reign of over 70 years is the longest of any British monarch and the longest verified reign of any female head of the state in history. Well, Queen Elizabeth II was born in Mayfair, London, during the reign of her paternal grandfather, King George V. She was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of the York, later King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. When her father acceded to the throne in 1936 upon the abdication of his brother Edward VIII, making the 10-year-old Princess Elizabeth the heir presumptive. Well, she was educated privately at home and began to undertake public duties during the Second World War, serving in the Auxiliary Territorial Service. In November 1947, she married Philip Mountbatten, a former prince of Greece and Denmark, and their marriage lasted 73 years until his death in 2021. They had four children: Charles, Annie, Andrew, and Edward. When her father died in February 1952, Elizabeth, then 25 years old, became Queen of the seven independent Commonwealth countries: the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, and Ceylon, known today as Sri Lanka, as well as head of the Commonwealth. Elizabeth reigned as a constitutional monarch through major political changes such as the troubles in the Northern Ireland, devolution in the United Kingdom, the decolonization of the Africa, and the United Kingdom ascension to the European communities and withdrawal from the European Union. Well, the number of her realms varied over time as territories gained independence and some realms become republic. As Queen Elizabeth was served by more than 170 prime ministers across her realms. Her many historic visits and meetings include state visit to China in 1986, to Russia in 1994, and to the Republic of Ireland in 2011, and meetings with the five popes and 14 US presidents. Well, significant events included Elizabeth's coronation in 1953 and the celebration of her silver, golden, diamond, and platinum jubilees in 1977, 2002, 2012, and 2022, respectively. Although she faced occasional Republican sentiment and media criticism of her family, particularly after the breakdown of her children's marriage, her annus horribilis in 1922, and the death in 1997 of her former daughter-in-law Diana, support for the monarchy in the United Kingdom remained consistently high throughout her lifetime, as did her personal popularity. Elizabeth died aged 96 at Belmore Castle in September 2022 and was succeeded by her elder son Charles II. Elizabeth was born on 21st April 1926, the first child of Prince Albert, Duke of York, and his wife Elizabeth, Duchess of the York. Now, her father was the second son of King George V and Queen Mary, and her mother was the youngest daughter of the Scottish aristocrat Claude Bowes-Lyon, 14th Earl of Strathmore and the Kinghorn. She was delivered at 2:40 GMT by caesarean section at her maternal grandfather's London home, 17 Bruton Street in Mayfair. The Anglican Archbishop of York, Cosmo Gordon Lang, baptized her in the private chapel of Buckingham Palace on 29th May, and she was named Elizabeth after her mother, Alexandra, after her paternal grandmother who had died 6 months earlier, and Mary after her paternal grandmother. She was called Lilibet by her close family based on what she called herself at first. She was cherished by her grandfather George V, whom she affectionately called Grandpa England, and her regular visits during his serious illness in 1929 were credited in the popular press and by later biographers with raising his spirits and aiding his recovery. Elizabeth's only sibling, Princess Margaret, was born in 1930. The two princesses were educated at home under the supervision of their mother and their governess Marion Crawford. Lessons concentrated on history, language, literature, and music. Crawford published a biography of Elizabeth and Margaret's childhood years, which is entitled The Little Princess in 1950, much to the dismay of royal family. The book describes Elizabeth's love of horses and dogs, her orderliness, and her attitude of responsibility. Others echoed such observation. Winston Churchill described Elizabeth when she was two as a character. She has an air of authority and reflectiveness astonishing in an infant. Her cousin Margaret Rhodes described her as a jolly little girl, but fundamentally sensible and well behaved. Elizabeth's early life was spent primarily at the York residence at 145 Piccadilly and Royal Lodge in Windsor. During her grandfather's reign, Elizabeth was third in the line of succession to the British throne, behind her uncle Edward, Prince of Wales, and her father. Although her birth generated public interest, she was not expected to become queen, as Edward was still young and likely to marry and have children of his own, who would precede Elizabeth in the line of succession. When her grandfather died in 1936 and her uncle succeeded as Edward VIII, she became second in line to the throne after her father. Later that year, Edward abdicated after his proposed marriage to divorced American socialite Wallis Simpson provoked a constitutional crisis. Consequently, Elizabeth's father became king, taking the regnal name George VI. Elizabeth had no brothers. Since Elizabeth had no brothers, she became her presumptive, and if her parents had subsequently had a son, he would have been heir apparent and above her in the line of succession, which was determined by the male preference primogeniture in effect at the time. Well, Elizabeth received private tuition in constitutional history from Henry Martin, vice provost of Eton College, and learned French from a succession of native speaking governess. Now, a Girl Guides Company, the first Buckingham Palace Company, was formed specifically so she could socialize with girls of her age. Later, she was enrolled as a sea ranger. Well, in 1939, Elizabeth's parents toured Canada and the United States, as in 1927 when they had toured Australia and New Zealand. Elizabeth remained in Britain since her father thought she was too young to undertake public tours. She looked tearful as her parents departed. They corresponded regularly, and she and her parents made the first royal transatlantic telephone call on 18th May. Well, in September 1939, Britain entered the Second World War, and Lord Hailsham suggested that Princess Elizabeth and Margaret should be evacuated to Canada to avoid the frequent aerial bombings of the London by the Luftwaffe. This was rejected by their mother, who declared, "The children won't go without me, I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave." The princess stayed at Belmore Castle, Scotland, until Christmas 1939 when they moved to the Sandringham House, near Norfolk. And from February to May 1940, they lived at Royal Lodge, Windsor until moving to Windsor Castle, where they lived for most of the next 5 years. Well, at Windsor, the princess staged pantomimes at Christmas in aid of the Queen's Wool Fund, which bought yarn to be knit into military garments. In 1940, the 14-year-old Elizabeth made her first radio broadcast during the BBC Children Hour, addressing other children who had been evacuated from the cities. She stated, "We are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers, and airmen, and we are trying to bear our own share of the danger and sadness of the war. We know, every one of us, that in the end all will be well." Well, I have shown you 10 very expensive and rare old coins of Queen Elizabeth, and I have also given you a very quick brief history of Queen Elizabeth II reign and early life, and I hope you have enjoyed the video. Please, if you like my video, then please subscribe to my channel and keep visiting